If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
This is Brett Dickinson with the Brett Dickinson Sports Hour, and we're here to talk a little about fantasy football today. Fantasy football is going to start up in about a month and a half, and everybody needs a couple of quick tips just to make sure their draft goes correctly, and everybody has a good knowledge of the players to look for and what positions to look for. Starting off, you always want to practice as much as possible. All these websites with fantasy football, they all have their mock drafts that you can fill out. I mean, it doesn't cost you anything. Make sure you get on there. Do your mock draft. Do as many as you possibly can. When the time comes in August, a week or two before my drafts, I'm going to do one a day, at least one a day, just to make sure I got all my positions down, where players are going, who I want, where to take them, all that good information that you definitely need to be a fantasy football superstar. Maybe make some money off of it. A lot of people do money leagues, so let's try to help you make some money. First off, let's start with the most important position in fantasy football. It's not quarterback, not wide receiver, it's running back. Running back is the most important position in fantasy football because there's not many out there that are worth anything. If you look over the rosters, how many running backs do you say are true number one running backs, with the split, carries and all this kind of stuff now? So you need to find 2 or 3 studs to, base your team off of. So let's look at, first couple rounds, you want to take running back. First round, obviously, you want to take a running back. Don't fall for it. I fell for it last year, took Michael Vick with the first pick. That did not work out very well for me. I actually had the first pick in 3 different leagues, took Michael Vick in all 3, only made the playoffs in 2, didn't win a championship last year. So I'm reverting back to my old ways. Don't fall for the hype with the quarterbacks. Don't fall for the hype with Calvin Johnson and the wide receivers. You need to stick with the game plan, stick with the running back position. The first running backs you want to look at, the top tier, are Arian Foster, Maurice Jones-Drew, Ray Rice, LaShawn McCoy. And out of those 4, you really want to look at Arian Foster and LaShawn McCoy. They're the youngest out of the 2. They've got fresher legs. They haven't carried the load as much as the other 2. And plus, they're not going to deal with a holdout this year. LaShawn McCoy just got a big fat contract. Arian Foster just got a big fat contract. Ray Rice is still waiting for his big fat contract. He definitely deserves it. It should be coming, but if he starts to hold out and he starts to leak into training camp, you might be a little iffy about whether or not he's going to be ready for the start of the season, which means, you're going to need somebody to fill a spot for the first couple of weeks until he's ready. Maurice Jones-Drew, same thing. He's carried a heavy workload the past couple of years on a very, very bad offense. Blaine Gabber's the starting quarterback. That's enough said. Their best wide receiver is Laurent Robinson. He had his best year as a slot receiver last year for the Dallas Cowboys. So we don't know exactly what the Jacksonville offense can give besides Maurice Jones-Drew, so there's going to be a lot of wear and tear on him as well. And if you can't get one of those 4, you need to look at the next tier. The next tier is Darren McFadden, Chris Johnson. These guys are, will be available in the back end of the first round, and you need to look for one of these guys that's going to get a lot of workload, and he's going to perform in the red zone for you. You need points. And then you also want to look in, later rounds. Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson has been dropping in drafts everywhere because of his injury history. Coming off the ACL, will he be ready? Will he not be ready for the beginning of the year? Will they put him on the PUP list? Well, it doesn't matter. It's Adrian Peterson. You take him. Take him in the second round. Take him in the late first. If you need a running back, Adrian Peterson's the guy to look at. You also got guys like Jamal Charles coming off an injury last year. Another guy, a lot of things were expected out of him last year, and you didn't get a chance to see it. So maybe he gets back to full strength, but he's worth the risk in the second, third round. And then you want to look at later rounds, you want to look at like a Sean Green, a Ben Jarvis Green-Ellis. These guys are going to get the mass of the workload for the running backs, and you want to make sure you have at least 3 or 4, so these guys are good to get in the later rounds, 5, 6, 7, somewhere around there. You want to have at least 4 good running backs. Hopefully you have 5 because you need the depth, as anybody could see last year with Jamal Charles going out and Chris Johnson slow start, stuff like that. Darren McFadden went down for basically the second half of the entire year, and so you need running backs to fill your roster. You need more running backs than any other position. If you want to look at any other position to look at, it'd be wide receiver. You need wide receivers, but you can wait on wide receivers. You can get a Kenny Britt in the 5th round, who was a stud for about 4 or 5 weeks last year until he got injured himself, but he can be somebody that's going to be a starter for you every single week. Same with Vincent Jackson. You got Jeremy Macklin, who should be producing at a better rate this year. He came off an illness last year. Everybody was kind of questionable what kind of illness it was and if he would make it back. His counterpart, Deshaun Jackson, should have a bounce back year. He's not your every down wide receiver, but he gives you big plays, gives you big touchdowns. He's a hit or miss. You put him in the lineup, maybe he scores a 60-yard touchdown. That gives you 12 points right there. And in the later rounds, you look at guys like Pierre Garçon. He's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in Washington. You got Reggie Wayne, who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in Indianapolis. You got young quarterbacks that are going to look for a go-to guy. These are the guys they're going to look at, the veterans that know what the position takes, and they're going to get the ball in their hands, especially in the red zone. Finally, my last piece of advice would be to wait on tight ends. There is a bunch of tight ends in the league now. Rob Gronkowski, Jim Graham, everybody knows about them. Somebody's going to bite on them, take them in the first, second, third round. We're not very sure what else is out there, but we know there's a lot of good tight ends. They're not, we're not going to produce at Jimmy Graham's level, but you can get a Kobe Fleener with Indianapolis, and he's in the last round of the draft, and you got yourself a backup tight end. This guy might be Andrew Luck's favorite target because he went to Stanford with him. We don't know, but there's definitely worth a shot there. We also have guys like Brent Selleck, who's going to go later in the draft. Jermaine Gresham, the guy from Cincinnati, he's going to get more familiar with Andy Dalton, and we're looking at him possibly putting up 700, 800 yards, 8, 9 touchdowns. We're looking at players like that you can get later in the draft, so you don't have to waste your top picks on tight ends. So again, you need these running backs in the first couple rounds, so you don't waste your top picks on tight ends like Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski. So after that, you're looking at defense and kicker. Defense and kicker, you wait. No need to jump on it. All right, you can find a kicker. Some leagues will let you not even draft a kicker. I would suggest that over anything, just so you can have the depth. You wait it out, see if anybody's getting injured. Then you can fill the roster spot with, drop that guy, fill the roster spot with the kicker. Defense is another one. Don't pick until the second to last round. You got plenty of good defenses out there. You got your Baltimores, your Pittsburghs, but you also have your Cincinnati, which is going to be further down in the draft. The Jets are going to be further down in the draft this year. You're going to have good defenses later in the draft. Arizona Cardinals showed up last year, and they should only improve upon what they did last year with Patrick Peterson at the helm, Calais Campbell. You got Darrell Washington. You got a couple good young players to build upon, so that defense should definitely improve. So remember to wait on defense and kickers this year, wait on tight ends, and draft heavy on running backs in the first couple rounds. So your roster should look as you should get 2 quarterbacks, about 4 to 5 running backs. You should get about 4 to 5 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, a defense, and a kicker. You fill in the rest in the waiver wire. Cam Newton came out of the waiver wire last year and ended up being one of the best players in fantasy football. So there's always one of those guys that you can get to fill the roster with and off the waiver wire. And people like Cam Newton, you can get Jamal Charles came off the waiver wire a couple of years ago. These are players that you can look at the waiver wire, but make sure you have your draft board set. Make sure you're out mocking. Make sure you know where the players are going, so you can set your roster to be a championship team this year. Make some money. Everybody wants that extra couple $100, but it's more importantly, you got the bragging rights. I lost the bragging rights last year, and it was absolutely miserable for me. I can't live it down for another year. So when you're projecting your fantasy football team, make sure you have your roster set. Everybody's in line. You know where everybody's going to go. You be prepared. That's all we can say, is just be prepared for fantasy football this year. Start now, start early, start often. Keep mocking, keep looking at where players are at, keep on reading about where players are projected. Don't fall for all the projections, but at least get an idea where these players are going to go, and make sure you fill your roster with a lot of running backs and wide receivers. Those are your money makers. That's your fantasy football update.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.